Welcome to the Human 2 podcast, the podcast that investigates how we stay human and true to ourselves during challenging times in our professional lives, with a focus on the accountancy and finance profession. After all, accountants are human too. I'm Hannah, founder of Accountancy Hub and director of Human 2 Limited. I'm also an inclusion consultant and an ICAW chartered accountant. Today, I had the pleasure of talking to Ben Wilson, who is an expert ACCA tutor specialising in the Advanced Audit and Assurance exam. He has over 15 years' experience as an audit examiner, marker, and lecturer, and I'm sure you'll already know Ben if you're in the ACCA space. In this episode, Ben shares his career journey, we discuss trainee life at the Big Four, and we talk about the transformative impact of his recent ADHD diagnosis on his personal and professional life. We also chat about the challenges in balancing work and study, the key to success in ACCA exams, and the importance of networking and seizing opportunities in one's career. It is a brilliant episode for any accountancy trainee or anyone that just wants to get to know Ben a little bit more. So really hope you enjoy. Hi Ben, and welcome to the Human 2 podcast.
Hi Hannah, thanks for having me.
I'm excited to get to know you more today. I mean, we've had a brief chat a long time ago, but for those that don't know you at all, and I know a lot of people will because you're well known in the ACCA world, can you just introduce yourself and tell everyone who you are?
Sure. So my name is Ben Wilson. And I specialise in helping students to pass the AAA exam, which is one of the options papers towards the end of the ACCA qualification. And if you're studying ACCA, you possibly have seen me. I do quite a lot of work for the ACCA as one of their expert tutors. So I'm in quite a lot of ACCA promo material. I also spent a long time working at Kaplan, and I'm still in loads of Kaplan's promotional and educational videos for various courses. And because I sell my own courses now directly to students, I do a lot of kind of self-promotion. So if you're on LinkedIn, I probably annoy you at some point with trying to spread awareness of my courses and products. So that's me.
Incredible. So where did it all start? How did you get into accountancy? Could you give me a little potted history of your career?
Sure. So for me, I had no idea what I wanted to do when I was picking my A-levels, I had no idea. So I picked A-levels, my 16 to 18 exams in the UK, based on things that would leave doors open to me. So I picked mainstream academic subjects. And then the same when I went to university, I studied biology because I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I quite enjoyed biology. And I thought that's academic, it will leave doors open to me. I finished my degree. I had no idea what I wanted to do still. And I had some advice that if you go and become an accountant, if you get the ACA qualification as I did, or the ACCA qualification, it's a bit like delaying a career decision for 3 years. You learn about business, you learn how companies work, and you get another qualification, which will open doors for you, but also will leave you open to a wide range of different careers. So it kind of was just pushing a career decision another 3 years down the line for me. And I finished my ACA and I still had no real idea what I wanted to do. But I really enjoyed college. I really enjoyed learning about the accountancy rules, doing the exams. I thought the college lecturers looked like they were having a great time. And that's why I ended up coming into doing this teaching. I had a chat with my college lecturer who said he thought I'd be decent at it and why not give it a go. And that was about 20 years ago, and I've never regretted it. I've absolutely loved this job.
Wow. So did you sort of go into education almost immediately after you'd qualified?
Yeah, so I did, I think, a year post-qualified at KPMG. And then I joined FTC Kaplan, or now Kaplan as it's called. And that's standard for a lecturer at Kaplan or BPP. They tend to be like a year or two post-qualified. So college is fresh in their mind and they start lecturing at that point. So you could argue that means they don't have a huge amount of wider real world experience. But actually, I'd flip it around and go, at that point, I think I was a really good lecturer because I could really understand where the students were at. I'd only just
Yeah.
studied it myself. I knew where all the pain points were, and
Mm.
I can understand the difficulties they would have balancing, a full workload, work life with study, with other stuff as well. So, yeah, I mean, there's pros and cons to being a relatively young lecturer, but you can understand where your students are at a bit more then.
Yeah, totally. I mean, if I was to suddenly go into tuition now, honestly, I can't remember half of the content. And because I haven't worked in, audit or, those kind of technical areas, I'd have to brush up a lot on my knowledge.
Yeah, that's normal. Like, I would say most of the stuff I taught, particularly when I first started, I've taught pretty much everything that's in the ACCA or ICAW qualifications at some point. Um, I've never really understood any of it until I've had to teach it, until I've had to explain it to someone else. And
Yeah,
that's I think that's quite common. Like, you can understand it well enough to go, oh yeah, I can get by in this, but to really get it, to
yeah.
really understand something, I think you've got to be able to break it down and explain it to someone who doesn't understand it. And if you can do that, that means you really get it.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, especially working at the Big Four and doing ACA exams, it's all about just passing it, just getting over the line. You're not trying to like understand every single bit of the syllabus, you're just like,
Absolutely not.
please pass this exam.
Yeah, there's no time for that. I mean, it feels like crazy thinking back at it now, but if I failed an exam, I'd get the sack. I mean, the
Yeah,
downside risk of failing the exam was enormous. So you put everything into passing this, but it wasn't about, can I really understand this subject really widely? It was, there's a game to play here. I
yeah.
need to pass this exam. I need to learn the rules of the game to pass this exam, and
Mhm.
then I'm done with this. I very much, when I was studying, I learned how to pass the test.
Yeah.
That's what I did. When I've been teaching it, I've understood the subjects more.
Yeah. Do you think, because I mean, it's well known that the Big Four have strict exam policies. Do you think it's got stricter over the years? Has it eased off a bit? What do you see with the students that you're teaching?
Um, compared to when I studied, it has become slightly, and I say slightly more generous, slightly kinder,
Mm.
slightly more arm around your shoulder. But I think that sort of reflects society a little bit. When I studied, when we would have a mock exam or a test, when the results came out, they'd put the results at the front of the class on the pinboard with everyone's names on it. So
Oh,
you'd get against your 30 peers in your class, you'd get to see exactly where you were. And if someone scored 15%, their name was right there at the bottom for
mm,
everyone to see. And that person to be kind of sat crying in the corner about having been named and shamed as being miles off the pace.
yeah,
Now, that doesn't happen anymore. So
good.
when I was at Kaplan teaching, that stopped and it
Yeah,
became a little gentler. It would have number 1 to 30 in the class and tell you the mark, but
yeah,
not tell you the name of the person who'd got 15%, who was named and shamed, no longer named and shamed.
yeah.
They've also become, they still have those rules about, if you fail a certain number of exams, you lose your job. Your job is dependent on you passing, but they're more relaxed now in how they apply that. And they'll give you more support to help you to get through.
Mm,
When I was there, it was if you got below a certain mark, you were out, and there was no conversation. It was just that was it. You were done. Even if you were good at your job, the partners
mm,
liked you, you were out.
mm.
So it was harder. It was a bit harder then.
Tough, tough. Well, I'm glad it's changed a bit because that's not. I don't think that's the way to sort of bring up the next generation.
Yeah, it's very stick, isn't it, rather than carrot.
Yeah,
It's not supportive and nurturing. It's
no,
kick you while you're down.
yeah,
But yeah,
mm,
old school. I think I'd
old
describe it
school.
as.
So you started off in audit at KPMG. What is audit for those that don't know? Trainees might be listening to this and they might be working in a different area and they don't really know what audit is, or they're just thinking of going into accountancy.
Sure. So audit. So the companies that I used to work on, I used to audit when I was at KPMG. The BBC was my main one, and also TUI Travel. So the BBC, you've probably heard of it, big broadcasting organisation. They take loads of public funding and create programming, spend it on various things. TUI Travel is a holiday company that gets money from shareholders, from investors, and sells holidays to customers to try and make a profit. Now, if you wanted to invest in TUI Travel, for example, if you were a potential shareholder, And TUI Travel says, yeah, we're really profitable. We make loads of money. Give us some investment because we are going to make you a fortune. You might go, well, can I believe you? Because surely you are going to say that because you want my money. Are you biased? Maybe you are. And what the auditor does is goes in and checks, verifies the numbers that TUI Travel are producing in their financial statements and says, we're independent, like we're not part of TUI Travel. And when they say they're making £10 million worth of profit, they actually are. You can trust these numbers because we've been in and done some work on them to give them the green light, the tick. And therefore, you as an investor can have a bit more confidence to invest in TUI Travel. Or if you're a taxpayer, you can have a bit more confidence that the BBC are spending your money on programming as they are saying they're spending your money on programming. So it's about providing an independent check to add credibility to financial statements or numbers that are coming out of a company.
I love that. That's such a good explanation. I've not heard of that before. Brilliant.
It's almost like I do this for a living, Hannah.
Yeah, it's almost like you literally do this as a job.
Take something complicated and make it simple. That's my whole job. I'm trying to do that.
How did you find that period in your life when you were training, doing your exams, working full time, working in a very demanding job? How did you find it all?
I loved it. I absolutely loved it. So I was in London, and we started in a large group of people who were all same sort of age. We were all the same stage of life. We'd come out of university. We were all starting our first jobs together in London. We had periods where you're at work and you're learning a new job. And at times it was hard and boring. And sometimes it was long hours and really dull, sometimes stressful. But then you were only ever about 5 or 6 weeks away from your next batch of college. And so you'd be at work and you'd be like, oh, I'm so over this. I'm done with this audit of TUI Travel or whatever. And then I go to college for a few weeks and the pace is totally different. Yeah, you've got to pass these exams, but it's a totally different type of environment and stress. And you're with your group of 30 peers that I went through all my exams in the same group of people. And the first couple of weeks, the exam's not for a while. It's not that stressful at this point. And actually, you're just enjoying being a university student again, or a school kid, really. And then as the exams approach, college gets a bit stressful. And then the exam finishes and, I get to go back to work now. And actually, that's a change. And yeah, that can get hard at times. But actually, I really like the variety. I love the people. Some of my closest friends still are the people that I went through my accountancy exams with. Because when you go through a stressful time in your life together, bonds you. It groups you together. We still meet up regularly, and it's 20 odd years ago that we all trained together. But so last weekend I had a couple of friends stay with me, and they're people that I trained with. So they've come up from London. I live in Yorkshire, but we've got that bond from that time, and we've maintained friendships because we have that strong connection. So it was a great time in my life. I loved it.
I love that, and I'm still friends as well from those early days of your career. It is such a formative time. So
I'm not sure I'd have said that at the time. I'd have said, this is really hard work. Woe is me. God, it's stressful. Aren't I a hero? But sometimes it's hard to reflect properly at the time when you're in it. But looking back now, I loved it, and I did enjoy it at the time. I would have been I'd have told you a bit more of the hard sides of it at the time. But I'd say if anyone is still studying now and is listening to this, like, make sure you stop and smell the roses. Right, look at the sunset or whatever. Like, appreciate where you're at, because it is it's a fun time of your life, even though it's hard.
Yeah, it felt very work hard, play hard. Obviously it's pretty much one of your first jobs, and there's a lot to learn, as you said, long hours. But then there was a lot of going out, socializing, celebrating after passing exams. It was all just like a blur looking back now. But yeah, there was definitely a lot of fun times. So you now specialise in Advanced Audit and Assurance, which is an ACCA exam.
Yeah.
What do you like about that exam, and how have you ended up teaching that one in particular?
So when I was at Kaplan, when you're a junior lecturer, you basically teach whatever it is that they need you to teach. We've got a gap for this. You said in your interview you wanted to be a tax tutor. Well, unlucky, because we need someone to teach financial reporting or whatever. So when I first started, I taught whatever they needed me to teach. And you quickly kind of work out what you're better at. So I'm where there's loads of rules like tax, I'm not as good. I'm not as good at like bringing that to life. But where it's discussion and conjecture and subjective and written exams, I really come into my own. So I quite quickly specialised in case study papers and auditing. Because and although they sound quite different, they're actually very similar in terms of the skills that you need. An advanced auditing exam has big scenarios that you have to break down and write a tailored answer that really addresses the requirement. Very similar to it. There's a lot of overlap between that and case study type papers. So you get a lot of tutors who are, if you're good at one, you're good at the other one of those. So the thing I really like about it, particularly the AAA exam, is that it's hard. Right, it's really hard to pass. The pass rate is somewhere around 35% typically. It bobs up and down a bit, might get up to 40, just sometimes goes down towards 30, but somewhere broadly in the mid 30s. And of the people that are sitting that exam, they've often done 11 or 12 ACCA exams already to get to that point. They've passed 11 or 12 exams, and then only 1 in 3 of them managed to pass this one. So these are ACCA exam experts, and 2/3 of them failed the exam. Right? It's really hard to pass. And what that means, and why I like that as a tutor, is there's huge scope for me to add value. And the thing I find really rewarding about teaching is where I can get someone who doesn't quite understand it, doesn't quite get it, and break it down for them and provide them with resources and support that allows them to go from someone who doesn't quite get it and scores 40 to someone who actually does get it and it clicks, and then they score 60% and they pass. That to me is the most rewarding part of being a tutor, when I can take someone who's been really struggling, can't get through it on their own. I can help them to get up to a pass and they can move on with their career. I've taught tons of like prize winners in the past. When someone scores 80%, it's amazing. It feels great. But that person would have passed anyway without me. Let's be frank about it. But the person who scores 53, who's previously failed the exam. I mean, I've worked with some students who failed a lot. My record, I think, is a lady that had failed 24 times.
24 times.
Yeah. And there's the exam's once a quarter. So yeah, you can probably do the maths. That's a long time she's been trying to pass the exam. And she passed with me, and it literally she'd been trying to do this for years, and it literally changed her life. It means she can move on with her career and finally put this behind her. That's really rewarding when you can help someone who's been struggling and get them over a really important career goal for them. That's a massive. I love that. I really that's what really motivates me. The person who's scoring gets a prize is lovely, but it isn't the one where I feel like I've really made a difference.
What do you think makes the exam so difficult? Why is the pass rate so low?
Most of the ACCA exams are quite technical, quite a lot of rules to learn. So if you imagine like all the technical exams, it's like having a bowl of pasta in front of you, right? And a good way of eating a bowl of pasta is to take a fork and spin it around and eat your pasta. Right? The tool that you need to pass a technical exam is learning the rules, right? And then memorizing them and putting them out in the exam. The auditing exam is a written discursive exam where there aren't many rules, right? It's more like a bowl of soup being in front of you. And if you take the fork, the tool that was really successful for eating the pasta, the technical exams, and try and use that to eat your soup, it doesn't really work. And most students try to eat their soup with a fork when it comes to AAA. They apply the same study techniques that they did for the previous exams. I'll memorize the textbook because that really helped me with the tax exam where there were loads of rules to learn and I got marks for showing I'd learned the rules. In AAA, there aren't any marks for showing you know the rules. There aren't really any marks for calculations, 1 or 2 here or there. It's all about technique. It's all about showing you've understood the challenges that the business is facing and can give an appropriate piece of advice. And that's a very different skill to the technical exams, more technical exams that come earlier in the qualification.
Interesting. And then once you've finished AAA, how many other exams are left, or is that one of the is that like the final one?
So when you're doing ACCA, the last 4 exams the students can do in any order. So sometimes AAA is the last one, and sometimes they have 1 or 2 more to do after that. So there's 2 compulsory exams and 2 optional ones. So there's a compulsory financial reporting, which is SBR. It's called SBR. Normally people do that one first. Then they do advanced auditing as an options paper. Then maybe advanced tax as their second options paper. And then there's SBL, Strategic Business Leader, which is the case study paper within ACCA. People tend to do that last, but you don't have to. So sometimes people do them in a funny order because, for whatever reason, they choose to do them differently. But often it's they've got 1 or 2 more exams left after they've finished AAA.
What do you think is the secret to being successful in ACCA exams?
Good question. For a lot of students, with ACCA, a lot of students are working full-time. They are often a little older than so when I was an ACA student, I was fresh out of university and I did it in 3 years because I got study leave. It was amazing. Like, my employer gave me time out to go to college. Very few ACCA students get that, or certainly the ACCA students I work with. So they've often they work full time and they don't get any time out from work to study. They're often slightly older, so they often have family commitments or caring responsibilities, that sort of stuff. So what often happens with students is they have great intentions and they're absolutely capable of passing the exams, but they don't have the time to commit to give themselves the best possible chance. So a real key ingredient for success is, let's say a student is studying towards the June exam sitting, is that they map out how their time is going to work between now, because we're recording in February, between February and June, and then they make they carve out time, and they don't just say, I intend to do this. They make adjustments to their life. So I book some leave from work. I talk to my manager and say, I'm studying. So on Tuesdays and Thursdays, I'm going to be coming into work at 10 a.m. because I'm studying before work on a Tuesday and a Thursday. They book in childcare favours from their friends or wider family so that on a Saturday morning they can study. So the students I find that tend to do best are the ones that go, I have got all these other responsibilities, but I'm going to proactively manage them so that I've then got my time to study. And I get so many students who go, things have just taken over and I've not been able to do the study that I'd intended to. And that life happens, right? I get that. But the more you can do up front to carve out space and scope for you to give it your all, the better your chances will be of success.
Yeah, I think you're totally right. And at Accountancy Hub, we host regular webinars, and we had one last week, which was called the Ultimate Study Toolkit. And it was all about study habits, learning styles, having a growth mindset. But basically, a lot of the things you just said then about planning, having a study plan, looking at your annual leave. Like, it doesn't sound, it's not rocket science, but a lot of people don't realize that you do have to think about that months in advance. And then, you might want to use some of your annual leave to study or to have it straight after the exam once you've sat one or multiple exams. Put it in your work calendar, put it in your project tracking system at work, put it in your personal calendar, do all that kind of planning in advance. Also, your team will thank you for it because they know that you've got, you're out because you're at college and then you're out because you're sitting the exam.
Yeah.
There is a lot of sort of life admin you need to do to be successful, I think.
Yeah, and sometimes it is really simple tips, like you've just said there, like not just intending to take some time out of work, but actually booking it. And the other one I find that's really simple, I give this advice to lots of students, and they go, oh, that makes sense. I've never thought of that, is flip around when you're going to study. So most people study in the evenings because They've got a busy work day and then they study after work. That's the vast majority of students will do, and that's what they'll plan to do. But then the studying is your balancing figure. Like the best case scenario is you do everything during the day and you're tired, and then you do your study. That's the best case scenario. The worst case scenario, which will often happen, is something happens at work and you have to stay late, or something happens with the kids and therefore they're late to bed, or you're not feeling well, or there's something good on Netflix, or whatever that means that your study gets lost in the evening. Flip your day around. Get up an hour earlier and study from 6 till 7 or 5 till 6 or whatever it is. When the kids are still in bed and there aren't any emails coming through from work to disturb you, your boss is not hassling you, and you will actually do the hour of study that you had intended to do if you reverse your day and prioritize it and make it the first thing you do. And I advise all my students to do that. And the ones that do it go, that was probably the best thing you said to me, because instead of intending to do 4 hours a week of study and actually doing an hour and a half, I actually did 4 hours of study. It's worth thinking about anyway.
Yeah, it's such a little tweak, but it can make all the difference. So you've developed a career that you really enjoy. A lot of people, when they finish their accountancy exams, come to a crossroads where they're like, okay, am I going to stay where I am? Am I going to move internally? Am I going to go into industry? If I'm in industry, am I going to go into practice? What am I going to do? What helped you sort of decide what you want to do as a career and just kind of head in the right direction?
Sure. Well, I had options like most people do. If you work at Big Four, when you qualify, they tend to, if you've done okay and they've quite liked you, they'll tend to offer you lots of things to help you to make you stay. So they offered me going into corporate finance or corporate recovery, and I did a bit of stuff in valuations. And they'll try and encourage you to stay by offering you opportunities internally, and you're getting offered loads of stuff externally by recruiters who are getting in touch with you and saying, we would like you to come and interview for this role, this role, this role. I'd say when I was doing my studies and when I was at KPMG, I thought I would see a job that I liked. I thought I'd go to one of my clients and see someone doing a role that I thought looked like me, that I thought I could see myself doing in the future. And the only time I ever felt like that was when I was at college, when some of my lectures looked like they were having the best time. They were loving their job and they were going home at 4 o'clock. And I was like, I could really do with that. I'd love that. And I got the loving my job bit. I never really got the going home at 4 o'clock, because teachers do a lot of stuff outside of the actual teaching that you don't see if you're a student. Yeah. Anyway, what would I advise students is that your career will take a jaggedy path, right? It isn't you join somewhere and most people in the modern world don't just steadily work their way through a career with the same company and work there till retirement. The modern world's not really like that. You jump around a fair bit. Best bit of advice I could give you is, where something looks interesting, give it a go. Particularly if you've done an accountancy qualification, you can always go back to being an accountant. Right? There will always be jobs for people who want to work in audit or work in practice in some regard. You'll always be able to go back and find a role. If something interesting pops up and you get the opportunity to pursue it, go for it. Right? Why not? What have you got to lose? Right? The worst thing that can happen is you've got a qualification that will allow you to drop back and do what you were doing beforehand. So I took a risk going into teaching. It doesn't, as a junior lecturer, it doesn't pay very well. And the career prospects are nothing like being at Big Four and having the partnership route. But actually, that's, to me, it's much more important. It has been, it still is much more important to me to enjoy what I do rather than be, the richest person in the room or whatever. Or have the biggest status because I'm a partner at KPMG. Those things have never been that important to me. I get much more out of really enjoying what I do day to day. So grab hold of opportunities as they arise, and they will. I'd also, so I'm going to track back a little bit and talk about, so my business partner is a guy called Tom Clendon, who I think Hannah. Tom and I work really closely together. And I'm going to steal one of Tom's catchphrases, which is, life is a job interview. Right? You do not know who you're speaking to, where that will end up, right? Something might not look like your next career move, but it might be. So Tom and I have ended up working really closely together, and we've done our careers together have gone in a place that neither of us would have expected. But I got to know Tom because he was a lecturer on my tutor training when I was a junior lecturer at Kaplan. I went on a tutor training course that Tom was running, and the two of us hit it off, and we spent time outside of the training, sort of getting to know each other a little bit, kept in touch, and then 15 years down the line, an opportunity came up, and Tom went, I think, oh, that guy Ben would be good for that, and that's where we ended up kind of coming together and pursuing the opportunity that we now do, where we teach independently. We run our own courses for our respective subjects. But that came because I made a really good connection with someone who I didn't at any point think that was going to be my future career, but actually it did end up being. And you never know when that thing will happen to you.
Yeah, that is so true. And it just shows the whole kind of social side of work is so important as well, building those connections in and outside of work. If you're literally just turning up to do your job, being miserable about it, and then going home, it's just, it's not going to help you build those important relationships that you need for the rest of your career. Okay, so neurodiversity. As you know, I'm dyslexic. I do broadcast it, but I try not to too much because I don't want to be like the dyslexic accountant. It's not my personal brand. But I found out from talking to you that you've been recently diagnosed with ADHD. Can you tell me how that actually manifests for you personally?
Yeah, and I would say exactly the same as you, Hannah. Like, I don't intend to be the ADHD AAA. I've already got enough letters.
Yeah.
The AAA tutor is enough. I don't want to be the ADHD. Oh, goodness me, it's confusing, right? So I do have ADHD. How it manifests for me is I'm either massively interested in something and into it, and I'm super focused, and I am very productive, and I'm all over it, or I can't get out of bed in the morning. I can muster no enthusiasm for it whatsoever, whatever this thing is. If it doesn't interest me, I can't remember what it is. I can't remember what I've said I'm going to do. And so if there's tasks that I'm not going to find interesting, I'm just terrible at them. I find admin boring, and where I find things boring, I do them really badly. So any student that's on my course, they will know that a lot of the things that I find exciting, like the teaching side of it, or providing them support and feedback, I'm all over it. When it comes to like dates of the course and administrative stuff, that virtually all of my students will have had a message from me at some point saying, "Oh, sorry, admin's not my strong suit. This is the thing I'd intended to give you," or "Sorry, there was a mistake with that date," because I find that kind of stuff, it just goes in one ear and out the other.
Interesting.
Yeah, and that's a classic trait of someone with ADHD, that you either have hyper focus, hyper attention, where and ADHD is about not having enough dopamine in your brain. So not to get too sciencey, but it's about dopamine transmission within your brain. And if you're interested in something, your brain gives you a little hit of dopamine, and therefore you can focus, and your brain functions well. If you're not interested in it, no dopamine, and your brain's just like, what's the point? Where's the dopamine here? And I'm a bit like that around kind of admin and dates. I don't think it's helpful to go, and certainly I'm only recently been diagnosed. So I would have said in the past, I just have strengths and weaknesses.
Yeah.
Now I would say I understand how my brain works a little bit differently, and I try not to use it as an excuse. So I don't, so with dates and meetings and things like that, I try to self-adjust. So everything I do is in my diary with a reminder, because otherwise I will miss it. If I said to you, Hannah, oh yeah, great, let's go for a coffee and let's meet up next Tuesday at such and such a place, such a time, there's absolutely no way I would turn up unless I had put it into my calendar with a reminder to tell me that I was going to be doing this thing, because I just don't retain that kind of thing in my brain.
Yeah. And did you kind of always, you said that you were diagnosed recently, have you always kind of suspected, or did you just think, oh, strengths and weaknesses? And if you hadn't suspected it, what led you to get a diagnosis?
Yeah, very much the second one of those. I didn't think anything. I had no idea. And actually talking to like my sister, my parents went out about what I was like when I was younger. There were signs that I had ADHD when I was a kid, but I didn't pick up on it, and I don't think it was as much of a thing then. Certainly wasn't as well known. And I didn't have the classic ADHD symptom, which is fidgeting and being unable to concentrate in class. In fact, the opposite. Like where I was interested in subjects, I used to get, I'm going to sound really arrogant now, but I'd be like the best kid in the class at like maths or science subjects at school or business or whatever. Like I would win prizes in my exams because I was really into it and passionate about it. Or if it was art, I would be the most disruptive kid in the whole. I didn't like English either. I would be really disruptive. But I wasn't fidgety, but I would just be bored and perhaps a little bit. Well, I was the headmaster at my school would used to say like you're a bit of a enigma, Wilson. You're either in here because the teachers told me you're the best kid they've had in it all year and they want to award you some prize, or I've got another teacher telling me they want to expel you because you've not paid any attention for at all in my subject and you pay no interest and you're bringing the rest of the class down with you. And that apparently is very classic ADHD, that you're either really into something or not at all. And so there were signs that I was like that when I was a kid, but no one ever picked. I certainly didn't pick up on it. No one else did. And then I've just, although like ADHD is being neurodiverse, and you go online and you see it called a disorder or even a disability. I just don't see it like that at all. I just think my brain works slightly differently, not massively differently, just a little bit differently. And that's really positive in some senses, that if I get into something, I really go for it and I'm amazingly productive. I get tons done and the quality will be great. Or I really struggle to get going with something. And and I'm not very good at admin. I'm not very good with dates and times. But those admin and dates and times things you can adjust to. And I've led a perfectly successful career and life without knowing I had ADHD and just self-adjusting for the things I wasn't very good at.
So what made you get the diagnosis in the first place?
So I've been self-medicating for years and not realizing. So I think I mentioned earlier, ADHD is all about a lack of dopamine in your brain, or dopamine transmission. And I've been doing things to flood my brain with dopamine for years without realizing that was me self-medicating. So lecturing, being at the front of the classroom, I was addicted to it. I still am. I get a buzz out of teaching that is when you've stood in front of a group of 30 people or whatever, or you explain something to someone in a way they've not understood it before and now they get it, my brain goes, ooh, and it releases dopamine in the same way and this is how ADHD medication works. It just releases a bit more dopamine. And I function really well and I breathe and I do everything better because I've had that, standing at the front of a classroom and teaching buzz. I've admit it now, I've smoked and vaped heavily for years. Smoked a bit, vaped very heavily. And I've started vaping to stop smoking. And then I followed the classic pathway that a lot of people, if anyone listening to this is a vapor, ex-smoker, they probably can identify with this, that I smoked a bit, I vaped a bit, then I vaped more, because you can vape everywhere. Pretty much. It's not as socially unacceptable as smoking. And both, so smoking, vaping is nicotine, and that again is it releases dopamine in your brain. So I'd been self-medicating with lecturing, particularly in the classroom, and vaping, smoking. COVID came, and my work life changed dramatically, as everyone's did, and I never go in the classroom anymore. Very, very rarely do I actually teach live. It's all online and mainly pre-recorded, and I don't get the same buzz from recording a great video that I would do from standing in front of a group of people and like seeing the lights go in people's eyes when I've explained something. So I've lost that bit of self-medication, and I stopped smoking vaping because it's unhealthy. I just made a lifestyle choice that I wanted to stop, and so my brain wasn't getting its usual dopamine. And I had about 3 or 4 months where I just had no motivation to do anything. And it was really starting to get me down. My work and family life was suffering. I went to the GP and they said they think I've got a form of depression, and I just didn't agree at all. I'm not depressed. I'm not unhappy about anything. I'm not. My life's great. I'm really, really lucky. I'm lacking motivation, and that it wasn't. I've been around a lot of mental health issues in the past with family members. I knew I wasn't depressed, and so I went to see a psychiatrist. I wasn't familiar with this terminology, but a psychiatrist is someone who can actually give you a medical, as a medical doctor, who you can have a heart specialist who would obviously specialize in the heart. A psychiatrist is a specialist in mental disorders, if you like, or mental health. But they're a qualified doctor in it, and therefore they can diagnose and prescribe you with medication. So I saw a psychiatrist for a couple of hours and talked about my life and how I feel and what's happened and why she was like, I 99% I know what this is. And then said she thought it was ADHD, and I could not believe it. I did not believe it at all, because to me, ADHD is the kid in class who is fidgeting, can't sit still, and that was never me. But actually, the more she explained it, the more I read about it, I was like, actually, I am a very dark tick in a lot of these boxes. She prescribed me I had to do some tests. Then she prescribed me some medication. It was like, in my professional opinion, you have this, but we'll only know for sure if you start the medication, see what happens, because you may find if it doesn't do anything, then it means I've got this diagnosis wrong. Anyway, so I started the medication, and it was like someone had flicked a switch, and I was back to being the really good, positive version of me that gets loads of stuff done, that is really productive, that is really engaged in family life and personal relationships and all this sort of stuff. It's just me on a really good day all the time. And so I started medication 3 months ago now, and honestly, it's been transformative. It's been amazing.
Gosh,
yeah,
that's amazing.
Mm.
And also, it just shows how many people might get misdiagnosed, because sometimes, as you said, like the symptoms can look like depression or look like anxiety, look like mental health, when actually it's neurodivergence.
Not that at all. Yeah. And if you go and see your GP, they've got. So if you're listening to this from outside the UK, if you go and see your family doctor, your first line doctor, they've probably got 5 or 6 minutes to see you before the next person comes in. And you can't diagnose something complicated in that amount of time. You just can't. They have to spend time with you. And to go through the healthcare system in the UK to get to see a psychiatrist is a long, long process of jumping through lots of hoops. But I was in a very fortunate position that I was able to pay to go and see a psychiatrist, and therefore I could get that diagnosis quite quickly. And that is not the case for a lot of people. But and actually, since I've told people about this, I've had quite a lot of people say, "Oh, my son, I think, has ADHD. We've been to the doctor, and then we've been to see someone else, then we've been to see a psychologist, and now we've got a 2-year waiting list until we can see a psychiatrist." And I was very fortunate in that I was able to just pay to go and see one straight away. And I think, Hannah, from when we spoke previously, you were fortunate in that work were able to help you to do the same thing, to get your diagnosis. And all I would say to people is, if you are in a position to either to do it yourself, or your employer is there to support you, it means you can work out. Not everyone has this, but you might. And if you feel like you have these symptoms, I'd encourage you to read about it. And if you think that you do have these symptoms of what I have or whatever else, then by all means go through the standard healthcare system, but it might take you a while to get to where you need to get. And I don't know. For me, it would have been a couple of years of waiting, and actually that would have been 2 years of treading water. And
Yeah.
so I'm glad I did it.
Have you managed to lay off the cigarettes and the vapes?
Yeah, totally. I haven't vaped at all.
That's
Nor do I
amazing.
want to.
Yeah, well, my partner James, he, the same as you, he was a smoker. He quit smoking. He now vapes, but a bit like you said, he vapes way more than he ever smoked. Like, he is vaping,
Yeah.
every hour he
Yeah.
vapes. But his New Year's resolution is to cut down. And so he's like bringing down the number
Really
of vapes.
hard.
Yeah.
Well, smoking is a little bit self-limiting. It was for me. It smells horrible. People who are non-smokers really don't like it and really don't want you to do it around them. So you kind of have to go outside. It's cold in the UK for a lot of the year. It's often raining. You don't being outside smoking a cigarette. It's like I'm feeding my nasty habit here. Whereas vaping tastes lovely. Like they're really sweet, delicious flavors.
It smells like cherry watermelon.
Yeah, I mean they're a bit sickly, some of them, but like they taste absolutely delicious. And you can sit and do it while you're doing other things. If you work at home, you can vape in your office and no one will ever know about it. And there's very few places you can't vape. And so you can be on it pretty much constantly. And for a lot of people, that's how they end up getting with it. I found I couldn't cut down because it just built back up again. I cut down the strength of the vapes I had, so like they were weaker ones. And all that meant is I just did the weaker ones and vaped more.
How did you actually wean yourself off them?
Just stopped.
Yeah.
You can get like nicotine patches and things like that, but I found the nicotine patches made me feel really sick. Didn't like them at all. And the nicotine withdrawal, it is an addictive substance. For me, it was like, I don't know, a week or two that I really craved vaping, and then I didn't really crave it at all. I just felt incredibly low because of the lack of dopamine.
Yeah, interesting. I need to get James to just go cold turkey.
But he has to really want to do it. You can't make him do it.
Exactly.
Yeah, like my daughter really wanted me to stop, as did my wife. And it's only when you really decide for yourself that you want to stop that you can do it. You can't have someone else being your motivation. It has to be you.
True. So now that you have been diagnosed with ADHD, has that changed anything in your life? Has it changed your teaching, anything in your personal life? What has that diagnosis meant for you?
Work-wise, not really. I guess just more mindful of being careful about administrative tasks. Yeah. I realize I'm not very good at those. I've always been a bit intense in the way that I teach. I get really passionate and really fired up, and I still am like that. And that's just, I don't know if that's my personality or my ADHD. But the two things are the same. I suppose it's part of who I am.
Who you are,
yeah. So no is the answer in terms of my work stuff. In terms of personal stuff, it has made like my relationship with my daughter, my wife, and my son. I think my wife cuts me a bit more slack on some stuff now than perhaps she would have done. And she's definitely more proactive in like the administrative side of our lives. She's like, it's not just that you're an idiot, it's that your brain means that you are just going to forget to do this. So so maybe a little bit of difference there, but no, not dramatically. I'm just much more engaged in my own life because my brain, and I'm like I was rewind 3 months ago and I was vaping heavily, or 6 months. I'm like I was then, rather than the kind of slight shell of myself that I became for a while when I didn't have enough dopamine going on in my brain.
So interesting. And as I was saying to you before we press record, I think it's 10 to 15% of the population are neurodivergent, and that increases in industries like ours. So potentially 20% or more of us are neurodivergent, and it probably helps us to be brilliant at what we do. But then, there are some downsides, but you can mitigate those quite easily. And you can really lean into your strengths. And when I was diagnosed and it was my firm that paid for the test, they then paid for coaching. And I had like 6 or 8 sessions of coaching with a neurodiversity specialist. And she really helped me kind of lean into those strengths.
Okay.
Yes, you can put things in place for the weaknesses, but you can actually, be like, actually, I'm brilliant at this, and lean into it, which I love. I mean,
that's a really good way of thinking about it. Yeah. And as you said, so let's say 20% of accountancy type people might have some sort of neurodiversity, but it's a spectrum, right?
Yeah.
It isn't like I either dark tick this or I don't have it.
Yeah.
If you read through the characteristics of someone with ADHD, most people have got some of them. But it depends how many of them you have, but it's a range and a spectrum. And a lot of people, I think, would go, I would have got, if I'd carried on vaping, I would have gone through my whole life and not known that I had this, because I'd been self-medicating, doing something unhelpful to I guess have some sort of positive benefit for me. I think it's possibly because I think there's been more awareness of dyslexia and dyspraxia over, certainly in the UK, over a longer period, perhaps, than there has been for other. I think did you pick this up when you were at school? You had it, Hannah.
So I was at primary school in a special class for reading. So I was behind with my reading compared to my peers. Then I did have some extra time at secondary school for working memory, and turns out that is the main way that my dyslexia manifests. It's not spelling, it's working memory, and it's reading, and it's phonemic decoding efficiency, which is about the sounds in words. So it was picked up, but I guess I just never was properly diagnosed. And then I did a history degree at university, which obviously involves a lot of reading.
Lots of reading, yeah.
And if I look over now my essay feedback, it says Hannah didn't complete the mandatory reading, and she didn't do any of the extra reading either, and it really shows. And honestly, every single essay it said that. So I was never getting through enough stuff.
Right.
And our exams were over multiple days. So we would have like 2 essays to write over 3 days. So I feel like I got my extra time through just, I could work all night if I needed to. Very few were under kind of strict exam conditions. So then when I went into the ACA, and obviously it's very time pressured, you're learning 3 exams at once, and my working memory is shot to pieces. I think that's suddenly when it really showed.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's funny. And also, you said you were self-medicating. I just did lots of stuff to compensate. I wrote reams and reams of notes. If I didn't write something down that someone told me, a bit like you, it just wouldn't happen.
Yeah.
So you end up doing all these things and just working too hard. I worked harder than I should have done for a lot of my life to overcompensate. I feel like I'm more anxious as a result of that. I have quite a lot of anxiety in general. So do you know what I mean? You just kind of learn more about yourself and what you were doing to compensate.
Yeah, totally understand that. Totally.
So now I'm going to move on to the whole point of this podcast, even though we've covered lots of human aspects, but it's called the Human 2 Podcast. Can you tell me about a challenging time in your life or career and what you learned from it?
Sure. So challenging times in my career, I've had probably 2 really challenging ones. One, so when I lectured at Kaplan. I've already said I joined there as a fresh lecturer, and I kind of worked my way up in that business into a sort of senior middle management role. So I used to run the Leeds office and wider offices in the northern region. So Leeds, Hull, Sheffield, Glasgow, Newcastle. I used to run all of those offices. I had about maybe 100 people report in my team, and Kaplan, like all businesses, had to respond to changing technology. And frankly, because of tech, they needed less lecturers. Instead of having to, the same class happening in every city around the UK at the same time, you can move something online, and you only need 1 lecturer rather than 4. So they had to right size, and I understood the logic. But I had to make about 25% of my tutors redundant. And these are people that I'd known for years, particularly the people in the Leeds office. It was easier with the people in the other offices who I hadn't kind of grown up with, if you like. But a lot of these people, I knew their families, knew their kids. I'd know their children's names. I'd been around their lives for years and years, and then had to make them redundant, and that was awful. I hated that. I saw it through, and it was a long process, but I found it really awful to do. And it made me resolve to not really want to be a middle manager anymore, because you're implementing someone else's decisions, and that management's fun when it's the tide's coming in, and things are growing, and you're wondering who to promote and who's going to get the biggest pay rise. These bits are fun. When it's the tide's going out and you've got to work out who's going to get the chop or drown or whatever, or who you're going to leave to the sharks, it's horrible. So that was really difficult for me personally. Obviously, even harder on people who are losing their jobs, but I hated it. So I left Kaplan. I found it a really challenging time, and I got. But actually, I reflect back on that time now and go, I learned an incredible amount. It was horrible at the time, but I learned an amazing amount about people's responses. People didn't respond in the way you would think they would, about human behavior. And I learned an awful lot about myself and about how to run a business and how to do it well and successfully, even in the difficult times, because I made loads of mistakes in how I did it and how I implemented that redundancy program. But I've been able to reflect on those and be better in the future. But sometimes when you're in the thick of it, it doesn't feel like I'm learning. It just feels horrible. Yeah. And then the other one, the challenging career thing, was after I left Kaplan, I went to join a company called Avado, which was a startup that was growing. I wasn't going to have to make people redundant because, the business is on the up. So but the bit that I was in, they had three parts of the company, basically. And one of them was accountancy training. And a new chief exec came in and went, these other two bits, digital and HR, are making a load of money. The third bit, accountancy, isn't making us any money. We're going to close that down. So I was made redundant because they shut down my whole division. And at the time, that was awful. I was then on the other end of the of that process. And I was like, how am I going to pay my mortgage? How am I going to, feed the kids, all this sort of stuff, and having sort of existential crisis. But actually, out of tough situations, you get the opportunity to go, right, what's out there? Right, what am I going to do now? Because I've got to do something. Forced into doing something else. And the job I now have, where I have my own business, where I sell my own courses directly to students. I do that because I was made redundant from Avado, and I had to go, right, where do I go now? And so out of the tough times, you learn a lot, and you're forced to do something perhaps more interesting and better for you. And I've always loved teaching, but the version of it that I do now, I absolutely I've always loved it, and I adore it now. I'm very lucky you will not meet a person who enjoys and is more passionate about their job than me. I absolutely love it. And the reason I'm here is because I had some really tough bumps along the way that pushed me into doing this.
Yeah. Oh, gosh. Talking to you and Tom, it just makes me want to be an accountancy lecturer. Maybe I can swerve. Well, we'll see how Accountancy Hub does. Right, finally, what would you tell your younger self? What would you say to your 18-year-old self?
Don't think too long term. Don't be thinking about the next 10 years. You can't control what happens. The world will be different, right? When the job I do now didn't exist when I was 18, because there was no online accountancy. It literally didn't exist. So I couldn't say, in 25 years, you'll be doing this. So don't think too long term, right? Think about what you can do positively over the next short to medium term to grab opportunities when they do arise, and they will arise. So I'd say to myself, relax, don't sweat the long term too much. Make sure you're enjoying what you're doing in the short and medium term, and things will just take care of themselves. I spent a lot of time being more worrying about the future, I think, when I was. I used to have these existential, what am I going to do? What's my career going to be? What am I going to do for my whole rest? And actually, don't worry about that. If you can spend the next couple of years doing something interesting, and then something else interesting will happen in 2 years' time. That might be the thing you do for another 5. Or if it's not, you'll probably learn something good from it that will put you in a better position to grab the next opportunity with both hands. I'd also, the other thing I'd say to myself is say yes to things. I've always have, but I'd say like double down on that. Right? You never know where it's going to take you. It might not feel like it's a worthwhile use of your time in the short term, but say yes because you never know where it'll go.
Oh, I feel like I needed to hear both of those right now, Ben. So thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. I feel like I've got to know a lot more about you. And we've covered such important topics, you know, neurodivergence and careers and, you know, being made redundant and thinking, what are you going to do with your life? So I hope that anyone listening to this found it helpful and insightful and you know more about Ben. Thanks, Ben.
Thanks, Hannah. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you.